Hello, friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dr. Vanessa Calderón. I'm so grateful to have you all here with me. I really love having these moments where I get to share some thoughts with all of you. I was talking to my sister the other day, and she was asking for support with something going on in life. Anyway, I gave her a few like coaching and words of wisdom or whatever, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I wish I had a pocket Vanessa. I wish I could just like go into my little pocket and say, 'Hey, pocket Vanessa, I have a question for you.'" And I was like, "Yo, that's my podcast. You can have a pocket Vanessa. Just go to the podcast." Anyway, I thought that was hilarious. Okay, so I want to jump in today and talk a little bit more about courage. So, 2 episodes ago, I think it's episode number 24, I talked about the 4 C's you need to have more confidence. And one of those C's is courage. And I wanted to do an entire episode on courage. Probably not going to be the only one I do because it is such an important skill to have. And I realize that so many people feel like they're bad at it, even when they're not. I used to think I stunk at courage. I used to think I was horrible at it. I thought I didn't have it. I thought I was really, I always avoided conflict. I must not have courage at all. Those were the stories I told myself. And one day I happened to be speaking at a conference and I'm on my way to the conference and I was at a layover because it was in an international conference. I have to say layover for international because I'm like, why would I ever have a layover for a domestic conference? I always fly direct. Anyway, it was an international conference and I'm at the layover and I happened to run into a colleague who's also going to speak at the conference. She's now one of my dear friends. And we sat there at the gate and we just kind of shared our life stories and connected. And it was the first time we'd actually chatted with each other. And I'm sharing my story with her. And the more and more I share with her, she keeps saying to me, "Oh my gosh, wow, you have so much courage. I can't believe you did that. It must have taken so much courage." And she kept saying the word courage over and over again to me. And it finally hit me, maybe I do have courage. Maybe I am someone with courage. And what I realize is that so many of us don't think we have it because it feels so uncomfortable. Because the word courage, if you think about it, it sounds so positive, like, oh, yeah, courage is great. It sounds so positive. But in practice, it feels so uncomfortable. And so many of us think we're bad at it because it can feel so uncomfortable. But the reason why we need it is because everything we want in the world, everything we want that we don't have right now, we don't have it for a reason. We've never had it before, usually, or we've lost it somewhere along the way. And in order to get it, we need to take action, but the action is going to feel uncomfortable. So everything we want is on the other side of that discomfort. And in order to get there, everything we want is going to require courage. So courage is so important to have, to cultivate, to practice, because the more and more we practice it, the easier and easier it gets to take action in the face of fear, because that's courage. Courage is taking action in the face of fear, and everything requires it. The success you want is going to require the courage to fail. In order for you to be successful, in order for you to do big things in the world, you're going to have to fail. And failure doesn't have to be something that's like a big dagger to the heart. It can just be something that you learn, you get up again, you keep going. But in order to do that, it requires courage, the courage to fail. If you want to love deeply, it's going to require the courage to risk heartbreak. You might have to have a heart broken along the way if you're going to love deeply. Intimacy requires the courage to be vulnerable. Love, in fact, requires the courage to feel grief. I used to think that the opposite of love was fear. And then I lost my mom a year ago, and I realized the opposite of love is grief. Holy cow. The deeper and deeper you love somebody, the more grief you're probably going to feel. So the more grief you feel, it's really just for me anyway, it was a mark for love, for how much I loved my mom. And so okay, that was a little tangent there. Oof, I got lost thinking about how much I love my mom and how much I miss her. So intimacy also requires the courage to be vulnerable. So we often underestimate courage because it feels so uncomfortable. And we assume that the discomfort must mean that we're just not good at it. But that's not at all the case, sweet friends. That's not at all the case. Courage is hard for everybody. If it wasn't hard, it would not require courage. If it didn't feel uncomfortable, it would not require courage. It would just be an action you took. So courage, the root word courage, C-O-R, cor, means heart, comes from the Latin word heart, corazón. It means acting from the heart. It's defined as acting in alignment with our values or our goals, despite experiencing fear, experiencing uncertainty, or having to take a risk. Now, neuroscience shows us that courage, again, it's not the absence of fear, but it's the ability to regulate our nervous system and regulate our fear and take action anyway. So courage is the ability to take action in the face of fear. And the more we know how to regulate our nervous system, the easier and easier it is to practice courage. One of the most important acts of courage that I have come to just experience in my own lived experience is choosing to live in alignment with who you are authentically, choosing to make decisions based from the heart that are in alignment with who you are. Why does that take so much courage? Because social programming, because the world has told us that we're supposed to do things this way or that way, or we're afraid to fail, or we're afraid to suffer, or we're afraid to do all of these things. But the more and more you can lean into who you are authentically, the more courage that requires, that is powerful. And the most important act of courage is choosing to live in alignment with who you are. Because the more you live in alignment with who you are authentically, the more freedom and sovereignty you create. And that is what we all want. Everyone I coach at the end of the rainbow comes like, I just want freedom, or I want inner peace. And all of that comes from living in alignment with who you are authentically. And that comes from taking acts of courage along the way. So why does it feel uncomfortable? Okay, so courage feels uncomfortable because, again, it requires you to take action when your amygdala, your fear center, is like booming. When your amygdala is firing, your body reacts with the physiology of stress. So your heart races, your palms get sweaty, your muscles get tense, you get like this discomfort in your stomach. All of that is your nervous system signaling danger. So our amygdala goes off and it signals danger. Now, the thing about the amygdala is that it is very, very sensitive, but it is not very specific. So it'll go off for anything, whether it's a real threat, like a real life threat, or it's a perceived threat. Now, this is so important to know that our amygdala is firing whether or not something is actually threatening, like really our life is in danger or not. It's gonna fire for all threats, perceived and actual threats. You're running late to a meeting, your amygdala goes off. Your body is safe, your life is not in danger, but your amygdala is firing. Now, the amygdala is part of our primitive brain. It's how many of us we're all born with an amygdala. And it is why the human species is so resilient, because the amygdala goes off all of the time. It is so sensitive, it'll go off for anything. You hear a loud boom, the lights go off, and you smell smoke, any sense of danger, your amygdala will fire. Now, remember, our brain has a negativity bias, which means it is scanning the world around us every 5 to 7 seconds, looking for danger. And the second that it senses danger, it triggers the amygdala, it fires right away. So what we need to know is we need to know that just because we sense discomfort in our bodies, just because our amygdala is firing, our stress response has gone off, that doesn't mean that something is wrong. But that is why courage can feel so uncomfortable, because even though we're acting in alignment with our values, even though we're doing something that we know is going to lead us to where we want to go in life, it can feel uncomfortable. It can signal danger because the human brain is wired to keep us alive and do it as efficiently as possible. And what that means is keep us hidden in a hole where nothing can come and get us, keep us really small so that no one wants to come and get us, never trying anything new. Because if you tried a new berry and the berry was poisonous, guess what? You're out of here, man. And if you left your cave in the middle of the night and got eaten by a dragon or by a lion, you're out of here. So courage means keeping us safe, which means never doing anything new, always keeping us really small so that we would stay alive. That's historically why the amygdala worked the way it worked. And it is so hardwired. It is incredibly hardwired. We're born with it. And it's important for us to know, again, that just because it fires, it doesn't mean we're actually in danger. So just because it fires, it doesn't mean anything has gone wrong. So there are some people that I have seen that are just better at it. They're better at practicing courage than others. And I have now known from studying this for so many years why this happens. For one, that amygdala, that tiny little almond-shaped, it's like a little almond-shaped structure in your brain. That amygdala, for some people, is born hypertrophied. It's born a little bit bigger than others, so it's more reactive. Why is that? So if you come from ancestral trauma, generational trauma, if you were born and had a lot of lived experience of trauma, that the trauma will trigger the fear response to go over and over and over again. It'll keep going off, and it causes the amygdala to hypertrophy. It gets bigger in size. Now, this is my story. I come from a ton of ancestral and generational trauma and just lived experience from childhood trauma. And so I knew my amygdala was hyperreactive. Once I started learning this, I'm like, no wonder I'm always like so nervous and scared. No wonder I can't feel joy. All of the stuff started making sense to me. But here's the thing that is so powerful, that if our amygdala is hyperreactive because we inherited that, we can shrink it back to normal. We can cause it to come back to its regular size. Now, the amygdala can downregulate when we practice regulating our bodies, when we practice nervous system regulation. I have a whole podcast episode on how to regulate your nervous system. It's one of the first podcast episodes here. So go back to the beginning. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, I'll link it because I don't see it here, but it's one of the first podcast episodes where I talk about how to regulate your nervous system and why it's so important to regulate your nervous system. And hint, hint, this is one of the biggest reasons why it's so important to regulate your nervous system, because you can shrink your amygdala back to its regular size. Now, you're never going to shrink it so much that it's going to disappear, but you want it to be at its normal size, not hyper-reactive. So some people have lower reactivity with their amygdala, which allows them to better be able to regulate their nervous system. So those are the people that can take much more action in the face of courage without being so afraid. I was not one of those people, but now I am, because I've practiced this over and over and over again. So you can too. And when you do this, when you regulate your amygdala and you shrink it back to normal, if you have kids later, you then pass on a regulated amygdala, a lower reactive amygdala, because that's how epigenetics works. You don't have to pass on the same trauma that you experienced. Once you heal the trauma, you pass on the healing to the generations that come after you. Pretty powerful. So that's one reason why people are better at courage. The second is upbringing. If you have early experiences where you were able to take risks and it was safe, you had safe risk-taking abilities, it increases your tolerance for fear. So if you had parents that were like, hey, you should go and try out for that team, and then you don't make it, and they loved you and they held you and they supported you, it makes you feel safe taking the risk, because it's not a big deal if it doesn't happen. If I don't get it, it's okay. I'm still loved. I'm still supported. I'm still held. And then there's another reason, beliefs and mindset. So for those of you that see fear as normal, fear, and this is a big muscle that I had to build, and I'm going to invite all of you to practice it. Fear or discomfort is normal. It's part of life. And I tell my kids this all the time. When they're going to bed at night and I turn off the lights and they're like, I'm scared, I lie next to them and I say, it's okay to be afraid. It doesn't mean anything's gone wrong. It's okay to be scared. And I caught my daughter when she was really young saying this to herself, and I got a tear in my eye because I was so proud that she was saying that to herself. She was lying in bed. She said she was afraid, and I came to lie next to her. I hadn't even said anything yet, and she puts her hand over her heart and she says, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be afraid. It was powerful. Those people tend to act more courageously than others because they have normalized the discomfort. They know it's not this big stop sign. And here's the thing. I trust, and I know that we can discern the difference between real fear and perceived fear. I trust that we can. And I just say that because I remember coaching somebody to normalize fear, and their thought was like, well, what if I normalize it so much that I can't tell the difference between when there's an actual threat or a perceived threat? And this really is about trusting yourself. Trust yourself to know that you will always be able to discern the difference between an actual threat and a perceived threat. And then the last reason why some people are really good at courage is just practicing. the more you can expose yourself to discomfort and train your nervous system to calm down, it'll recover more quickly and it'll be easier for you to do it in the future. So again, I have to tell you, I used to think I was horrible at it. Turned out I wasn't. Turned out I had lived a whole life of taking courageous action because every time I felt I was misaligned, so as an example, I matched into anesthesiology. So if you know anything about the medicine, the world of medicine, in order to choose your specialty, you have to choose a specialty, you rank it, and it's this whole long process. So I chose to be an anesthesiologist. And it's not an easy process. It takes a lot of work and interviews and all of these things. And then I got into anesthesiology, and that was really competitive specialty to get into back then. And I chose, when I was in anesthesia, I was like, whoa, I'm not happy. This is not aligned with who I am. And I had to switch, but I was terrified because I had to go through the entire process again. But I wanted to be an emergency medicine doc. And so I go back into the match process, and I realized, wow, that actually took a lot of courage, because what if I didn't match? What if I was lost? What if, all of these things? Same thing. There's so many examples like that in my life where I kept choosing to realign, to realign, to realign, to be in alignment with what felt true in my heart. And that takes so much courage. Oof, that takes courage now that I think about it. So the more and more, and then the same thing, I had been offered a CMO job of a large hospital system. It was a multi-hospital system CMO job. It was a pretty coveted position and chief medical officer job. And when I had gotten offered that, I knew that I was not in alignment with where I wanted to go. I wanted to start a coaching practice, and I wanted to support other people in all of these skills so that they can be the best versions of themselves. And so I turned down that job. I hadn't started my business yet. I wasn't successful at it yet, but I decided to do it because I knew that was in alignment with where I wanted to go. Courage. So again, the way to get better at courage is to practice it. Practice taking action in the face of discomfort. You regulate your nervous system. You remind yourself that it's okay to be afraid. It doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It's okay to feel uncomfortable. It doesn't mean something's gone wrong. And the more and more you regulate your nervous system, the better and better you will get at it. So, a few ways I want you to start practicing a little bit more courage. One, I want you to remember that your life is going to expand with your ability to practice courage. There's a really famous quote. It says, life expands or shrinks in proportion to one's courage. My husband shared that with me a long time ago, and that really landed with me because I realize I will always choose to live a big life, and that requires having a lot of courage. I never want to live a life of mediocrity. That requires having a lot of courage to play big, to play bigger in the world. And remember that courage is not the absence of fear. It's the choice to take action in the face of fear. All right, so how can you practice more courage? So number one, again, stop believing you don't have it. Just because it feels uncomfortable, it feels hard for everybody. Some people have just gotten better at regulating their nervous system. Again, lean into the discomfort. All you need is a few seconds to lean into the discomfort. That's it. In behavioral science, what the literature says is you just need to take the very first step. Once you take the first step in the right direction, it reduces your brain's perception of threat. It's fascinating. If you remember, I think in Frozen Part 2, the movie Frozen Part 2, yes, I have very young kids. I've seen all these movies. In Frozen Part 2, whenever the middle sister, I can't remember her name, Anna, I think it's Elsa and Anna, I think it's Anna, when she is trying to save her sister, she can't find her sister, she sings this whole song, and it's like, all I need to do is take the next step. That's all we need to do. And then there's Newton's law. Objects in motion are going to stay in motion. So once you take that first step, you reduce your brain's perception of threat, and then you're in motion. And once you're in motion, you stay in motion. And then the more and more you do that, you train your brain to rewire its neural pathways. Repeated courageous action retrains your brain. It rewires your neural pathways so that over time, you're able to regulate your nervous system better and better. All right, friends. That is a whole episode on courage. I hope you're able to practice some of these things and remind yourself that discomfort doesn't mean something's gone wrong. It just means that we need to regulate our nervous system, check in with ourselves, and practice courage because everything we want is on the other side of discomfort. And in order to get there, we need courage. All right. Love you all. See you next week. Adios.